All right, so let's jump into something that can make or break your Kubernetes setup.
Yeah.
Choosing the right operating system for your clusters.
Yeah.
It's one of those decisions that has ripple effects on everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your security, your performance,
Right.
how easy it is to manage things,
Absolutely.
even how your team works together.
Yeah, it really is foundational. And today, we're going to be looking at two popular options.
Okay.
Talos and RHEL 9.
Okay, so we got...
One's the newcomer,
Yeah.
built specifically with Kubernetes in mind, and the others that establish enterprise choice.
Right. So we've got the new kid on the block versus the old stalwart.
Exactly.
So which one comes out on top?
Well, let's start with security.
Okay.
Telos has this secure by design philosophy,
Right.
and they have this thing called an immutable file system.
Yeah. What is that?
Basically, once it's set up, it can't be changed.
Oh, wow.
So no more worrying about someone accidentally or intentionally messing with critical system files.
So you're saying like once it's set, you can't even go in there and tinker.
Yeah, you're really minimizing what can be modified, and that reduces your attack surface significantly.
That makes sense.
Think about common vulnerabilities like malware exploiting software flaws.
Well,
With an immutable system, those entry points become much harder to exploit.
okay, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a powerful concept.
Yeah, but what about regulated industries? They love their certifications, don't they?
Absolutely. They need those compliance certifications.
Yeah.
And that's where RHEL 9 has an advantage.
Okay.
You know, it meets all those stringent security standards.
Yeah.
Things like STIGs, which are incredibly detailed guides for securing systems.
Oh, wow.
So if you're in government or finance, RHEL 9 checks all those boxes.
Right.
While Talos might require some extra legwork to meet those specific requirements.
So it's not just about how secure the OS is, but also how well it fits into, all the existing frameworks and regulations and all that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about ease of management.
Right.
RHEL 9 is comfortable.
Okay.
If your team is already familiar with Linux,
Right.
they'll feel right at home.
That's a good point, but I wonder, does that familiarity ever lead to like cutting corners?
Oh, yeah. It's a valid point.
Especially with security.
Sometimes that comfort can breed complacency.
Yeah.
And we've seen situations where teams apply their old Linux habits to a Kubernetes environment
Right.
without fully adapting to the nuances of container security.
Interesting. Okay, so what about Talos then on the management front?
So Talos takes a very different approach.
Okay.
You manage it through a command line tool.
Huh.
There's no SSH access.
Oh, wow.
So this definitely adds a learning curve
Right.
for those used to traditional Linux administration.
Yeah, that's a big shift.
It is, but it depends how you look at it.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing?
You know, it can be seen as both.
Okay.
On the one hand, it enforces a certain level of discipline and security,
Right.
but on the other hand, it can feel restrictive.
Yeah.
For those who are used to that flexibility of SSH,
I see.
you kind of have to weigh the benefits of that streamlined, secure approach against that potential for a steeper learning curve.
Yeah, I can see that trade-off there for sure.
Yeah.
All right, so Talos is strict. RHEL 9 is familiar.
Yeah.
What about networking?
Talos keeps things simple by default.
Okay.
Only allows the traffic Kubernetes needs, period. This keeps things secure, but you might need to do some extra configuration
Yeah,
if you've got complex networking needs.
I see.
Now with RHEL 9, you're often going to need to manually configure your firewall to play nicely with Kubernetes.
I've heard some grumbling about firewall issues.
Yes. You see, Kubernetes has its own way of handling network traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and it can sometimes clash with those traditional firewall setups.
Right, right.
So for example, let's say you're using RK-E2,
Yeah.
the Rancher Kubernetes engine.
Mm-hmm.
If you try to run that on RHEL 9 with the default firewall settings, you're likely going to run into problems. Yeah, Kubernetes might try to send traffic in a way that your firewall blocks,
Oh.
causing all sorts of headaches.
So you really need to know what you're doing with those firewall rules.
You do. It gives you a lot of control,
Okay.
but it also requires a deeper understanding of how Kubernetes networking works.
Right.
You might need to disable certain firewall features,
Okay.
create custom rules, or even use third-party tools to manage things effectively.
So Talos keeps it simple but might be limited.
Mm-hmm.
RHEL 9 gives you power but needs careful handling.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now let's move on to something that's crucial in today's world.
Okay.
Automation and scaling.
Right.
Both Talos and RHEL 9 have got you covered there.
So you're saying they can both handle large dynamic deployments.
Yes, they both support automated deployments.
Okay.
Talos works great with tools like Terraform and Cloud, and it's
Yeah.
perfect if you're in a cloud-native environment.
Makes sense.
And for RHEL9, you have options like KubeSpray, which gives you that granular control that many enterprises need.
So both can scale, but they do it with different tools and philosophies.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
What about how they fit into a larger ecosystem?
Now, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
RHEL9 shines in enterprise environments.
Okay.
It integrates beautifully with existing tools like Red Hat Satellite for updates and Red Hat Insights for predictive analytics.
Yeah.
So if you're already using those tools, RHEL9 slots right in.
Like it was made for it.
Exactly. What if your focus is more on Kubernetes itself,
Okay.
not necessarily the broader enterprise ecosystem?
So a dedicated Kubernetes environment.
Exactly. And that's where Talos shines with its compatibility with Kubernetes native tools,
Okay.
like Helm Prometheus and Grafana.
Right.
It's a perfect fit if your world revolves around containers.
Okay, so RHEL9 is the enterprise all-rounder.
Mm-hmm.
Talos is the Kubernetes specialist.
Got it.
Now, if we do end up going with RHEL9, are there best practices?
Oh yeah, there are definitely some best practices that can make your life a lot easier.
Let's hear them.
First, remember, RHEL9 is designed to be a general-purpose operating system.
Okay.
It comes with a lot of features you might not need for a Kubernetes cluster.
Uh-huh.
Disabling those unnecessary services can reduce your attack surface and improve performance.
So it's like decluttering your digital workspace?
Exactly. Then there's Linux.
Okay.
It's a powerful security feature in RHEL9,
Right.
but it can sometimes interfere with how containers operate.
Oh.
So you might need to tweak its settings
I see.
or put it in permissive mode to avoid any conflicts.
So Linux powerful but needs careful handling.
Right. And then there's firewall configuration.
Right, we talked about those potential conflicts earlier.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with RHEL9, you need to carefully configure those firewall rules
Okay.
to allow Kubernetes traffic to flow freely.
Right.
You might need to create custom zones or define specific ports for different Kubernetes services.
This sounds like a job for automation.
You got it. And that's where a tool like Ansible comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ansible.
It can automate all those RHEL9 configurations, making sure your firewall rules are applied consistently across all your Kubernetes clusters.
So Ansible sounds like a lifesaver for busy admins.
Oh, yeah. It really takes the headache out of managing those complex configurations, especially as your Kubernetes environment grows.
So to recap, if you choose RHEL9, keep those best practices in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Disable unnecessary services, configure Linux properly,
Yep.
and master those firewall settings.
And if automation is your friend,
Yeah.
definitely check out Ansible.
So we've really focused on Talos and RHEL9 so far,
We have.
but I'm guessing there are other options out there.
Oh, yeah. The world of Kubernetes OSs is bigger than just these two.
What else should our listeners consider when choosing an OS for their Kubernetes clusters?
There are other factors to consider beyond the ones we've discussed.
Okay.
And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore those other contenders and dig deeper into the nuances of choosing the right OS for you.
Right, sounds good. So we've explored Talos and RHEL9.
Mm.
But you're right, there's a whole world of operating systems out there for Kubernetes.
You got it.
What are some of
Yeah.
some of the contenders vying for a spot in our clusters?
Well, you've got options like Ubuntu,
Okay.
known for its large community and ease of use.
Makes sense.
CoreOS, a minimalist OS designed for containerized environments,
Oh.
and Bottleneck OS,
Oh, okay.
specifically tuned for performance-sensitive Kubernetes workloads.
Wow. So it's like a buffet of operating systems.
It is.
Each with its own unique flavor.
Exactly.
How do we even begin to narrow it down?
Right.
What are some of the key factors our listeners should be thinking about
Well,
beyond those, core features we've already discussed?
one of the first things to consider is cost.
Okay. Budgets.
Yeah, some organizations might be working with tight budgets.
Uh-huh.
And in those cases, open source options like Ubuntu or CoreOS can be very appealing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They offer a great balance of functionality without the licensing costs
Right.
associated with enterprise solutions like RHEL9.
But I imagine for some organizations, especially larger ones, cost might be less of a concern
Right.
than things like support and reliability.
Absolutely. For those enterprises that need that extra level of support and assurance,
Right.
RHEL9, with its robust ecosystem and enterprise-grade support, becomes a more attractive option.
Right. So it just depends
Yeah,
what your priorities are.
exactly. And then you have specialized distributions like Bottleneck OS, which might be a perfect fit if you're running very demanding workloads and need to squeeze every ounce of performance out of your Kubernetes cluster.
Wow. Okay, so it's about finding that sweet spot
Mm-hmm.
between your budget,
Yeah,
your needs,
right.
support specialized features.
Exactly.
What about community support,
Community support is huge,
especially in the open source world?
especially in the open source world. A strong community means you've got access to documentation forums
Right.
and even direct help from experienced users. This can be invaluable,
Yeah.
especially when you run into those inevitable roadblocks
Right.
that come with any complex technology.
You're going to run into some problems.
It will.
So before you jump into any OSS, spend some time exploring the community.
Yeah.
See how active they are
Mm-hmm.
and whether they align with your style and your needs.
Find your tribe?
Yeah, it's like finding your tribe in the Kubernetes world.
Exactly.
You want to be surrounded by people who can help you on your journey.
Exactly.
Speaking of the journey, one thing we haven't talked about yet
Okay.
is container runtime compatibility.
Ah, yes. Your chosen OS needs to play nicely with your preferred container runtime.
Right.
Whether it's Docker containered or CRIO,
Uh-huh.
these are the engines that actually power your containers.
Right.
And different OCs might have varying levels of support for each.
Okay.
It's like making sure your car engine is compatible with the fuel you're using.
Right. You don't want to end up with a powerful engine that can't run because you've got the wrong fuel.
Exactly.
Compatibility is key.
What about performance?
Okay.
How do these different OCs stack up when it comes to actually running those Kubernetes workloads?
Performance is critical.
Uh-huh.
A slow or inefficient OS can drag down your entire cluster.
Oh, wow.
Some OCs, like K8s or Bottleneck OS, are specifically designed to be lightweight
Okay.
and minimize resource consumption, which can lead to better performance for your applications.
So if speed is your priority, those might be good options.
They are, but it's not always so simple.
Okay.
Different OCs might perform differently depending on your specific workloads.
Of course.
So the best way to know for sure is to run some benchmarks
Right.
and see how they perform under your specific conditions.
It's like test driving a car before you buy it.
Exactly.
You want to make sure it can handle the roads you're going to be driving on.
Right.
All right. So we've talked about cost,
Mm.
support community,
Yep.
compatibility, performance.
Uh-huh.
What about the future?
Oh.
How do we make sure our OS choice isn't going to become obsolete? That's a great point. Kubernetes is a rapidly evolving ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't want to get stuck with an OS that can't keep up.
Right.
So when you're evaluating your options, look for signs of active development
Okay.
and a strong roadmap.
Yeah.
Is the OS being updated regularly?
Uh-huh.
Are they embracing new technologies like serverless or edge computing?
It's like buying a phone.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to get one that's already 2 generations behind.
Exactly. You want an OS that's future-proof, ready to adapt
Right.
to the ever-changing needs of the Kubernetes landscape.
So consider the roadmap. Make
Yeah.
sure the OS is actively maintained. Anything else our listeners should keep in mind when thinking about the future?
It's important to remember that the Kubernetes world is all about flexibility.
Okay.
You might find that the OS that's perfect for you today isn't the best choice a year or two down the line.
Yeah, I can see that.
Your needs might evolve,
Mm-hmm.
new technologies might emerge, and you might need to migrate to a different platform.
So don't be afraid to change course if things aren't working out.
Exactly. Kubernetes is all about adapting and finding the best solution for your needs
At any given time.
at any given time. Now, let's shift gears from the theoretical to the practical.
All right, let's do it.
What are some concrete steps our listeners can take to actually evaluate these different OS options?
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of things to consider, but how do you actually go about making a decision?
Well, the best way to get a feel for an OS is to try it out.
Okay.
Spin up a test cluster experiment with different configurations and see how it feels in a real-world environment.
So try before you buy.
Exactly. It's like trying on different outfits before a big event.
You want to find the one that fits you best.
Exactly.
It makes you feel confident.
Makes you feel confident and dive into the documentation.
Okay, yeah.
A well-documented OS is a sign of a mature and supportive community.
Right.
The documentation should be clear, comprehensive, and easy to follow.
It's like having a good instruction manual. You don't want to be left fumbling around in the dark trying to figure things out on your own.
Don't be shy about reaching out to those communities we talked about earlier.
Right, yeah.
Ask questions, share your experiences, and learn from others who've been there and done that.
The power of the community.
Exactly. It's amazing how much you can learn from connecting with other Kubernetes enthusiasts.
So embrace the power of community. Gather insights from those who have already walked the path.
Yeah.
So try it out.
Mm-hmm.
Read the docs.
Yep.
Talk to the
Let's
community.
talk to the community.
Any final words of wisdom before we move on?
Remember, choosing a Kubernetes OS is not a one-size-fits-all scenario.
Of course.
It's a journey of exploration and discovery.
Right.
You need to find the OS that aligns best with your specific needs, your technical expertise, and your future goals.
And as we've said, be ready to adapt and change as your journey unfolds.
Exactly.
The Kubernetes world is dynamic,
Yes, it is.
and what works today might not work tomorrow.
Now, as we move on to the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
there's one crucial aspect of this decision that we haven't touched on yet, and it's something that should always be at the forefront of your mind when working with Kubernetes.
You're talking about security, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Choosing the right OS is just the first step in securing your Kubernetes clusters.
In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the security implications of your OS choice and discuss some best practices for building a robust defense system for your Kubernetes environment. Okay, so we've talked about the contenders, weighed the pros and cons,
Right.
explored the factors that might influence your decision.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
Yeah.
Now let's bring it all home.
Okay.
How does this actually play out in the real world?
Okay, let's imagine two scenarios.
All right.
First, picture a fast-moving startup
Okay.
building a cloud-native application.
All right.
Speed, agility, and security are paramount.
Right. Makes sense.
They're all in on Kubernetes, deploying new code multiple times a day.
So they need an OS that can keep up. Exactly.
They need an OS that can keep up with that pace.
Okay.
This is where an OS like Talos really shines.
That makes sense.
Remember that immutable file system we talked about?
Yeah.
That means they can spin up new clusters quickly and consistently.
Right.
Knowing that the underlying OS is secure and hasn't been tampered with?
Yeah, no one's gone in there and messed it all up.
Exactly. Plus, Talos integrates seamlessly with those cloud-native tools
Right.
that are essential for rapid development and deployment.
So it's like the perfect foundation for that, lean, agile startup environment.
It is.
Okay, now let's switch gears to a large enterprise.
All right.
They've got existing infrastructure, established security policies, and a team that's comfortable with traditional Linux.
Right. For them, stability, compliance, and integration are key.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's where RHEL 9 steps in.
Okay.
It's got that enterprise-grade support, that familiar Linux environment that their team already knows.
Yeah.
And it integrates seamlessly with their existing tools and workflows.
So RHEL 9 provides that sense of stability and continuity that enterprises often need.
Absolutely.
Two very different scenarios, two very different solutions.
It's true, but the core principle remains the same.
Yep.
Choose the OS that best aligns with your specific needs and context.
Yeah, right.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer in the world of Kubernetes.
We've said that a lot.
We have.
Yeah.
It's important.
And be prepared to adapt and adjust as your needs evolve. You might find that the perfect OS today isn't the ideal choice a year or two down the line.
Exactly. Flexibility is key in the Kubernetes world.
For sure.
Now, before we wrap up, let's circle back to security.
Oh,
We
yeah.
touched on it earlier, but it's so important it deserves its own spotlight.
Absolutely. Security is foundational no matter which OS you choose.
Couldn't agree more.
What are some key things to keep in mind?
First, let's revisit those immutable file systems. If security is your top priority, an immutable OS like Talos offers a significant advantage.
Yeah.
By minimizing what can be changed, you drastically reduce the attack surface.
Makes sense.
It's like locking down the foundation of your house,
Right.
making it much harder for intruders to break in.
So Talos is like that fortress. Limited number of entry points. Making it easier to defend.
Exactly. But even with RHEL 9, you can enhance security by leveraging its built-in features.
Okay.
Things like Linux, which provides mandatory access control,
Right.
or secure boot capabilities,
Okay.
which ensure that only authorized software is loaded during startup.
So think of these features as layers of defense,
Exactly.
making it harder for attackers to get in.
Harder to penetrate your system. And let's not forget about staying up to date.
Oh, right.
No matter which OS you choose,
Uh-huh.
make sure you're applying those security patches and updates regularly.
Super important.
New vulnerabilities are discovered all the time. Falling behind on updates leaves your clusters exposed.
It's like keeping your software immune system strong.
Exactly.
You need those booster shots to stay ahead of the threats.
You need those booster shots. And here's a pro tip.
Okay.
For those who really want to take security to the next level,
Right, let's hear it.
consider using a vulnerability scanner.
Oh, yeah.
These tools can proactively scan your OS and your container images for known vulnerabilities,
Okay.
giving you a heads up before those weaknesses can be exploited.
That's a good idea.
It's like having a security guard patrolling your Kubernetes perimeter,
Right.
constantly on the lookout for potential threats.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So combine a solid OS foundation with proactive security measures,
Right.
like vulnerability scanning,
Okay.
and you'll be well on your way to building a secure and resilient Kubernetes environment.
All right, so solid OS foundation,
Hmm.
proactive security measures,
Yep.
and you're good to go.
You are now, as we wrap up this deep dive, let me leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
As you weigh the different OS options,
Mm-hmm.
consider the balance between control and convenience.
Right.
Some OCs, like RHEL9, give you a lot of control over every aspect of the system,
Mm-hmm.
but that comes with the responsibility of managing those details yourself.
Whereas something like Talos is more streamlined, but
Right.
might feel restrictive to those used to having complete control.
Exactly. So ask yourself, where do you fall on that spectrum?
That's a good question.
What's the right balance for your team,
Yeah.
your workflows, and your organization?
So much to think about.
There
Is a question worth considering.
It is, as you embark on your Kubernetes OS journey.
And remember, it's a journey.
It is.
Stay curious, stay informed, and stay adaptable.
Yeah,
The Kubernetes world is constantly evolving,
it is.
and your needs will evolve along with it.
They will.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of Kubernetes operating systems.
We have?
We hope you found this exploration insightful and perhaps even a little bit inspiring.
I hope so.
Remember, choosing the right OS is a crucial step in your Kubernetes journey.
Mm-hmm.
And we encourage you to carefully consider your options,
Yes.
experiment, and find the solution that best fits your unique needs.
It's a journey.
Thanks for joining us on this adventure.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep exploring,
Keep learning.
keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible with Kubernetes.
Absolutely.